Hello, I'm Kay Drowan, and welcome to Fatima Today. When we think of the message of Our Lady of Fatima, given in 1917, we think about the story of 3 children being asked to make sacrifice and pray the rosary for sinners. In a nutshell, the story is about conversion. Mary asking all of us to have a change of heart, to convert to her Son, his message, and a new way of life, the Christian way. Today we're going to talk about that very subject, conversion, the call that Mary makes to each heart. And we are so fortunate to have with us a Franciscan brother, Brother Francis Mary Kalvelage. And he is now in New Bedford, Massachusetts, where he is involved in furthering the apostolate of St. Maximilian Kolbe, publishing wonderful works about our dear mother and her love for us. Please welcome Brother Francis Mary. Brother, it's so nice to have you on Fatima Today.
My pleasure.
I tell the audience that you are furthering the work of St. Maximilian Kolbe, and I know that puts you on a very high pedestal.
Right.
But I have read the books that you have edited, and for those out there who do not know anything about that wonderful Franciscan who is now a saint, Maximilian Kolbe, maybe you can explain his apostolate.
Yeah. Well, St. Maximilian was a conventual Franciscan who lived at the turn of the century, and he was a very talented young man, and he was sent to Rome to study for the priesthood. And while he was in Rome, there was a demonstration before the Vatican. The Freemasons were celebrating their, I believe it was the 200th anniversary, and they had, you understand that Freemasonry in Europe is more than just a fraternal organization. It's a form of, well, secular humanism. We'll say it's almost like a religion of secular humanism, deifying man above that of the Creator. And so they had a demonstration before the Vatican, and they were carrying big placards, and on these placards or posters were images of Satan standing on the head of Archangel Gabriel, or Archangel Michael. And so you know where they were coming from. And Father, saw these demonstrations. He said there should be something just as militant and just as strong and committed to the cause among Catholics. And that's where he envisioned organizing and starting a program, more of a movement than an organization, of total consecration to Mary. He felt that Mary, being the mediatrix of all graces, that she would have from God, and we know in our Catholic faith that this is a long tradition. It goes right back to the early church fathers. She's the new Eve, and so she worked right beside the new Adam, which is Christ, who redeemed us. But even as Eve participated in the fall with Adam, she ate the forbidden fruit, and then she gave it to Adam. Well, then the woman counterpart of Eve is Mary, the new Eve, that amended all this problem that arose. Well, anyhow, at the same time, it was related to him by the rector of the seminary that a Jew, a very adamantly anti-Catholic Jew, who had a brother who would become a Catholic and even a priest. And of course, the Jews have, and with reason, there have
like
been
a death in the family, really.
Yeah, right. And anyhow, this rector, told him about the conversion of this Jew through wearing a miraculous medal, just similar to the one that I'm wearing. It's the medal of the Immaculate Conception, by the way. And Franciscans have had a long tradition in promoting the devotion to Our Lady under her title of the Immaculate Conception. So you understand that it fitted in perfectly with his Franciscan vocation. There isn't a real Franciscan that's worth his salt that isn't a Marian apostle. So Kolbe, bringing it right up to date, because this was in 1830 that Our Lady appeared as Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal.
Right, in France.
That's right.
To Catherine Labouré.
Right, and so he was very much impressed that this Jew was converted through wearing the miraculous medal and reciting the Memorare. Okay, and he said, well, if he can convert her, if she can convert him, this adamant Jew who was really very anti-Catholic, well, then she could convert anybody, and then he used it as he called them his bullets. He called them his bullets, and
his bullets.
His bullets, because he was a military man, and he at first was even tempted to be a great strategist or a great general, that would lead the Polish people into liberation, because at that time they were separated between the three major powers that were separate, along beside Poland. In fact, they cut up Poland and divided it up among the three of them. So he thought that was going to be his mission, but there's a greater battle, of course, and that's for souls.
Yes, and he was very militant in his own way, because he went on to publish about the faith, very committed to Our Lady. I mean, his sermons, what he could think about Our Lady were new ideas that were just coming from him with such grace, and he would promote these through publications during the time when Hitler was really
gaining power. When he was gaining
persecuting Christians and especially Catholic
He never got involved in the political situation, but he did have a daily paper, and one of the editors got a little bit embroiled in that, but he steered away from the political issue. But he just presented the truth, which of course was being anti-Nazi, because the whole system was based on a lie. The superior race and all this baloney.
And of course, those of you who know his story, he ended up in prison under the Nazis in a concentration camp, and stepped forward and gave his life for someone else who was going to
a total stranger. I've been in that cell, which was almost like in a large closet, and 10 men were forced in there, stark naked, no furniture other than a little potty.
And he was the last to die. They starved them. He was the last to die, and they had to finally give him a lethal injection.
They gave him a lethal injection.
And there are two schools of thought about why did he step forward. One, of course, lay down your life for your brother, and of course that's, I'm sure, valid. But the other was that he was a priest. And he could be with them at their hour of death and console them. And God gave him that gift to do it because he was the last to die. And I imagine it was a horrible experience for all of us.
Formerly, when they die in these starvation cell bunkers, and this was a starvation cell bunker without any food or water until they expired.
Well, they're drinking their own urine.
And so, they would die in great agony and even in despair. And they would be tearing at each other and all the rest. But he had them singing hymns of praise to God and our Blessed Mother and reciting prayers, rosary, and all the rest. And so, he lifted their spirits. He gave them hope. And even after his death, when the story came out of his heroic giving himself in place of this man who was dying in such dire circumstances, it gave new hope to the prisoners and the whole prison system. Because here was a man that placed himself, in a position of great suffering, of great torment, because he loved his fellow men.
Now we get to you, brother, because I said you're following in his footsteps, and literally during that time when St. Maximilian Kolbe was working in Poland and suffering, you were in a plane.
Well, actually, I was in the service in the Second World War, and interesting enough, I flew over Nagasaki, which was, his foundation. It wasn't enough for him to establish a city of the Immaculate in Poland. He wanted to establish these cities of the Immaculate throughout the whole world. And the first place he went to was the Orient. He went to China. And there was a little animosity and jealousy between orders, how it is, in the old days, but today we're working together a little bit more. But anyhow, it didn't work out in China. So he went over to Japan. He was even stopped in at Vietnam, and that didn't seem to work out. Stopped in India. Well, anyhow, he established his house, his city of the Immaculate. It's called the Garden of the Immaculate in Japan. He established that in Nagasaki. And I flew over Nagasaki after the war because I was in the Marine Air Corps, and we had a recreation trip, and so I flew up to Japan. That was a month after I had bailed out of a plane over the Pacific, and that was the beginning of my conversion. You know, conversions just don't usually come like St. Paul's, you know, one fell swoop. It's usually a lot of circumstances that allow, you know, come together
Yes.
to bring about a complete
But Our
conversion.
Lady was really the one
definitely.
who, like that Jewish man, which was the first encounter that Maximilian saw her bullet striking, you had a rosary around your neck.
I was wearing a rosary around my neck, and I wasn't, sad to say, I wasn't praying it.
You're just using it as a talisman.
Right. I had a very good friend who was a fellow pilot, and he was wearing a rosary around his neck, so I said, well, gee, I need...
Good luck charm.
I need protection, right. And so, you know, the war had ended, and I was going to be a big hero, you know. I was going to shoot down all these Japanese planes, and people asked me, well, how many planes did you shoot down, you know, as a fighter pilot and all this, and by the time I got overseas, the war was practically over, and they were waiting for the invasion of Kyushu. Fortunately, that didn't happen because there would have been a tremendous loss of human life. But they had these kamikazes that would dive into our American shipping, and so we were there to protect American shipping, and I was flying a patrol, you know, off the island of Okinawa, and I got a little bit, antsy because, you know, it got kind of monotonous, and I like to do acrobatic maneuvers. Well, I did something that was very foolish, but I was young and reckless, you know. And at 22, when you have a 2,000 horsepower plane, you know, flying, there are a lot of things you can do, acrobatic maneuvers, but you don't do it normally with a belly tank on the plane. And so I did a maneuver that was called an Immaculate, and when I was on my back, I do a half roll and go in the opposite direction. The plane stalled out. So you know, you understand that a tailspin is usually when you're going down, down, down in a circular pattern. You're losing altitude continuously, but you're right side up. This one was upside down. My head was hanging down toward the Pacific. So I had that rosary around my neck, and you would think, you know, that it would have flown off, going down from about 10,000 feet to maybe a couple thousand feet, as far as I could go, and figure that I was...
You'd be joining Maximilian.
No, I had no awareness of Maximilian. I had no awareness of anything, practically. I would go to Mass on Sunday, but that was the extent of it.
Sure.
But that was something, anyhow.
That was.
And really, you know, today I'm fortunate that I grew up when I did, because I had the influence of my parents, and I did love and respect my parents very much. But at any rate, as I started going down, 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 I tried everything I could think of, but there was nothing in the manual as to how you get out of an inverted spin. So here I was, spinning upside down, going down, 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 and I figured, well, how am I going to save this plane? You know, I'm going to have a hard time explaining to the...
You're more worried about the material, right?
Right. So, at any rate, as I went down, I opened the canopy, opened the seatbelt, and gradually slipped out of the cockpit, not all the way out, because I hooked my feet under the dashboard, hoping that something would happen, you know.
My goodness,
and
what a daredevil.
I was hanging. I was thinking more about that plane than I was about my life.
Your mom brought you up that way. That's somebody else's property.
That's why they have young men fight wars, because they haven't got any brains. They don't know any better. So here I am, spinning down, and then I straightened my feet out, and I shot clear of the plane. I think it was my guardian angel that threw me clear, because the plane was falling right on top of me, you know. There was no reason why I shouldn't. Well, I didn't count to 10. I opened the ripcord, and here I am today. It worked. And
you feel that lady was really...
Well, I didn't really understand and appreciate Our Lady's role, although it kind of registered on me somewhat that rosary didn't fly off my head. It was there. And it was a tremendous humiliation, because people started questioning my flying ability. I had had a couple of close shaves before that. And so, you know, the point was that humiliation, along with the realization that she must have something to do with that miraculous, I think it was kind of a miraculous.
You were saved for some reason.
Yeah. She had something planned for me, evidently. So I came back from the service, and when I was in San Francisco, my hometown, my mother gave me a book. It was called More About Fatima. It was one of the first books that came out in English on Fatima. And it was very concise and detailed about the whole apparition and the words of Our Lady at Fatima. So I took this book and I put it aside. And my mother would keep reminding me about the book, and didn't you read it yet? You want to? And I said, oh, Mom, I'm not really that interested. And I really wasn't at that time. I was very worldly.
Mm-hmm.
So finally, she persuaded me to pick it up and read it, and I did. And you know the thing that impressed me so much? I didn't have much of the love of God in me. I'll be quite frank. I was very selfish, conceited, arrogant, whatever you want to, any of all those bad adjectives.
Sinner like the rest of us.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that. We're all sinners. Mm-hmm. I'll readily admit that I'm the worst. The point was, though, that with that book, I read how our Blessed Mother revealed to three innocent children, a vision of hell. Well, hell was just another word in the English language for me. I never really took the full implication of an eternal place of punishment for those who disregard God's plan for all of us, which is heaven. That's the plan for God. But we turn our back on God and we do our own thing, right?
That's right.
And that's where we end up, and that's where we begin our hell, right here on earth.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's face it, you know, if people are going contrary to God's plan, they're going to create their own hell. Mm-hmm. There's no question about it. So here I am. I'm reading this, and I say, gee, you know, maybe I'm heading in the wrong direction. So I went to City College, and I had an econ teacher who was, well, if he wasn't a communist, he certainly was a socialist, and he was poking fun of religion, and I didn't know enough about my faith to really answer him. I wasn't living my faith that well. So I went to the University of San Francisco, where I took some courses in philosophy, and, you know, gradually, and my best friend got killed, the one that was wearing the rosary around his neck.
Oh.
So, you know, that had a tremendous influence on me. I realized that my life could have been taken any moment if I hadn't, you know, made a change, in which I did. Fortunately, with the grace of God and the guidance of Our Lady, I read this great classic of St. Alphonsus Liguori.
Another great Marian saint.
That is. That's a great saint. Well, when I read that book, and I read that all graces come to us through Mary. She's a mediatrix, the one whom Jesus wants to be beside him in the distribution of the graces that he won on Calvary, but she stood at the foot of the cross to help distribute those graces. All graces that come from Jesus come through her hands.
Right. Whether you want to believe it or not, it happens.
Exactly. That's it. That's it. That's the bottom line. So, you know, with that, I wanted to join the strictest order possible. And the only one that I knew about at that time that was really real strict, although I was a third order Franciscan, but I figured I wanted something like the Marine Corps, you know, the shock troopers of the Catholic faith.
Yeah, that was your personality. That's why you picked flying.
Oh, boy. Well, that's...
Daredevil.
And so I tried the Trappists.
Ah.
I was with the Trappists for a year and a half. And I read a biography of a modern-day saint. This is what the Abbot introduced the biography about. He said, this is a modern-day saint to prove that heroic sanctity is possible in our day. And you know what it was? It was the life of St. Maximilian. Well, I never had any idea. I didn't have... I was happy with the Trappists. They weren't happy with me.
They weren't?
No.
You had too much spirit?
They kicked me out. I was trying to reform the Trappists. My novice master called me a big bundle of pride, and so I figured, boy, my days are numbered if that's the case. So as it turned out, yes, they decided that I didn't have a Trappist vocation. Well, you know, the Franciscans, it's a mendicant order. They're beggars. They'll take anybody. They'll take anybody.
They'll take anybody? Did you hear that up there? The Franciscans will take anybody.
They took me. And here I am. They're stuck with me after 49 years.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
And you know why?
Happy.
They just let you do your thing.
That's right.
And what was your thing? Your thing was
literature.
Touching people with literature as you were touched.
I don't think I got a higher grade in English in high school other than a C. and most of them were D's.
And now
I
you're
edited a magazine for 27 years. Now, tell me if that isn't her work. It wasn't my work, and it wasn't my decision. It's just how she works. She works with those who are least likely, in the worldly sense, to succeed, so that we depend on her. And we let the work be God's work and not our work. And that's the way it turned out. And that's why I ended up at Marytown. After I'd left the Trappists, within 6 months, I was at Marytown. And I was there for 47 years until I, or 46 years until I came to this new community in New Bedford.
In New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Right.
And you,
but you know, after 47 years, it gets kind of monotonous, right?
Yes,
you need a change, don't you think?
Do.
Sure, of course.
And are we lucky to have you in our backyard? You won't believe the books that Brother Francis Mary has edited on both our Lord Jesus and his mother. And we are going to do another show and tell them all about these books. They're all new. They're hot on the press. They're doing...
Yeah, within the last few years.
They're doing exceptionally well. Exceptionally well. And if one person out there would place one of these books in the hands of someone you know is really searching, or who doesn't even know they're searching, but they're empty, we might have another
I had a personal experience, if it wasn't for that More About Fatima book, that, you know, woke me up to the realities of what life is all about. That this is just a jumping off place for eternity.
Right.
Well, I wouldn't be here tonight.
And didn't you tell me before the show the saints who were converted by a book?
Yes, St. Ignatius Loyola. He was wounded in a battle, and he had a long convalescent period, and he started looking around for books. Books that he was reading before were all romantic books, you know, and everything. But he was in a hospital or a hospice that was run by sisters, and all that they had were Lives of the Saints, you know. Well, you know, he didn't have any choice. It was either to read those Lives of the Saints or just sit there, and there wasn't TV in those days, you know.
That was his entertainment.
Anyhow, he read a Life of the Saint at St. Augustine, and it made such an impression on him that we have the great St. Ignatius today.
Yes, and Edith Stein.
Edith Stein.
We just had the process for her canonization and in Rome, and she's a new saint, and we find that that's how she converted. She picked up a book. She was an atheist, a philosopher, picked up a book on St. Teresa of Avila's spirituality, grabbed her, and she said, "This is truth."
Sure.
And she couldn't get enough of reading about the Catholic Church.
You know, that was the thing that impressed me so much. You know, when you aren't really ardently seeking the truth, it really doesn't get through to you. But when your eyes are open to the truth and the great thrill and romance it is to know the truth, I couldn't get enough of it. And that's what the world needs today. It needs more truth. And that's why this latest encyclical of the Pope, or the one on faith and reason, those are the two wings that we fly up to God. They're not in conflict with each other, but they work together.
Well, at the beginning of the show, we talked about Our Lady of Fatima and her call for conversion, change of heart. That's what we're talking about today. And we know, yes, a book can open someone's eyes, but someone is normally out there praying for that person also. And as Maximilian Kolbe said, they are shot with Our Lady's bullet. If they pray to her and ask her to go to her son, then she will shower graces. Because at that great site, the Rue de Bac, where she came full of grace, Our Lady full of grace, showing the rays, she had rings. And when asked why some of the rings were brighter and shining brighter than others, she said, because the ones that aren't shining brightly are the graces no one or very few people ask for. So you have to ask. You have to go to her. And what was it Maximilian said he prayed? The Memorare and... And what was it?
Well, the big thing was total consecration, giving yourself totally to Our Lady.
Yes.
To be used as an instrument in evangelization. In other words, we're all participating in this plan of God to bring souls to Christ. And when we consecrate ourselves to Our Lady, she can use us in the most effective and the easiest and best way.
Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I have some of your books with me. We're going to talk about them on another show. If you miss that show, you can write to our apostolate. The address is at the end of the program, and we can either email you or send you a list of these titles. One is about the 3 great apparitions in France.
This just came out.
Brand new off the press. You will make this known to all my people. It's the story of Our Lady at Rue de Bac in France, the Miraculous Medal, Lourdes, and La Salette.
La Salette.
3 French, and it's a little history, too, about the church in France.
Very well illustrated. There's 70
Beautiful
illustrations, and
That's
many
La Salette.
in full color. Yeah, that's La Salette.
Beautiful, up in the mountains, La Salette
gorgeous.
in France. Another one is not made by hands, and here we have the shroud,
Right.
and which was an imprint of the
The
body
Shroud
of
of
Jesus.
Turin. Right.
And also Our Lady Guadalupe, and
All in one book.
and when she appeared in Mexico, she left her image on a
Tilma.
very cactus woven, very
Right. Very coarse.
coarse fabric.
Right.
And now we have one on a little flower, St. Therese.
Right.
And it's wonderful because she's just made Doctor of the Church in 1997.
And that's the title. Doctor of the Little Way.
Doctor of the Little Way.
Right.
This one's marvelous. A handbook on Guadalupe. Everything you want to know about Guadalupe is in here.
And this one here is by our founder, Father Stefani Manelli, who is an Italian priest who founded this. Our order is called, by the way, the Franciscans Priors of the Immaculate.
Wonderful.
Immaculate.
All generations shall call me blessed. And, of course, the wonderful motto by our Holy Father, Totus Tutus.
Right.
We'll see you next week, and we'll discuss these books. Thank you, Brother Francis Mary.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.